Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to go into some uncharted waters. What do you mean when I say uncharted waters? This topic has been trending for quite some time, and me personally, I'm fascinated with it. But in order to really understand it, you have to talk to people that has actually experienced it. And that's what we do on this show. We bring individuals that have actually had experiences in whatever area of their lives. And today is truly remarkable because this lady has not only written 2 books about her journey, but she's coming on to basically be authentic with her experience. Remember, this is a judge-free zone, so we're not here to judge her on anything. This is her journey. This is her experience. This is her first time doing a podcast, and I like to thank her for coming on and sharing that journey on this show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Miss Andrea Johnston. How you doing, Andrea?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an honor to be able to speak with you and to share this space and time with you.
I like the way you said that. Let's tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get into those 2 immaculate books that you have beside you. Tell the viewers a little bit about who Miss Johnston is.
Well, I am happily to say that I just celebrated my 40th birthday, and I'm
Congratulations.
really happy to have celebrated that. And leading up to this moment has been a whirlwind life that has been well lived. I work as a registered nurse. I've been at the front line for over 17 years. I love helping people, and that's just part of who I am. I'm a mother of 2 teenage boys, and I've lived in Wisconsin for 22 years now, and I grew up in New Mexico.
Wow, New Mexico to Wisconsin. How does that happen? Tell me. How does that happen? That's crazy.
Well, briefly, my grandmother lived in Chicago, and I used to spend summers with her, and I would be there for several months at a time. I made a lot of friends while I was there. I went to a concert, and when I was 16, I met a guy who asked, we exchanged information. I couldn't see the stage. I asked if I could sit on his shoulders. He said yes, and then we became pen pals, and then after high school, I decided to move to Wisconsin to be with him. And that was husband number 1, but that didn't work out. Stuck around, met husband number 2, and then that relationship, marriage dissolved, but we stayed friends and we're co-parenting. And my life today is that I still work as a nurse. I'm opening up my own consultancy, and I'm moving forward in my life because what I've learned as being a nurse is how to become an advocate for myself, especially. And so now I'm doing that for myself and bringing my message that has been mostly behind closed doors in hospitals, behind a mask, literally behind a mask for the last 3 years, to a larger platform, because people tell me that I have things to say and that I should be saying them. So now I've decided to find my voice, and there's a great journey story that goes along with it. But that's where you find me today.
Right. Let's get right down to it. This journey really started at a young age for you. And one of it started with a treatment and something new that I never heard of. Explain what this treatment was that you went into and how it's going to relate to book number 1. And what's the name of the book as well, the first book?
So the first book is called The Struggle to Change Healthcare. It is one woman's dream for the future of nursing. And both books are memoirs. And the book on nursing is just my experience as a nurse and what I've learned and insights gained, and how we can take the system that we have right now and make it pretty again and restore nursing. So that's book 1. And book 2 is the story about why I think the way I do for book one to have been created the way that it is, because
Okay.
I think a little differently. And my
Okay.
my neurodivergencies, you're not wrong. It started very early in my life, but it was because I was a very rambunctious child. I was kind of free range and outdoors all very often, and I got into trouble and I had head trauma. And, you know, I ran through a window at age 8, slit the top of my head open, loss of consciousness. And then the next year I hit my head on the side of a display case, loss of consciousness. And then the following summer, I run over my handlebars and hit my head again. And so, you know, those head traumas as an early child, like you don't really understand how those impact your learning abilities in life, and how it forms your brain differently when you've experienced head trauma. And so like learning isn't as easy. You kind of fall into patterns of destructive behavior and patterns of thinking that are not really purposeful, and they just kind of do harm. And so I knew that I had actually had head trauma that had happened to me early in my life. And so when I heard about ketamine treatment, which is the treatment that I went and sought, I knew that it was to help people push through old brain like tissue and create new dendrites, which are the new pathways for healthy thought formations to travel so that you can make better choices.
Andrea, let me ask you a question. I don't mean to cut you. I'm gonna ask you a question. During this time of these different, if I'm counting right, there's 3 head traumas at a very young age. Correct? So when you was having when these traumas and these head injuries occurred, I know you were young, but what were some of the things that you was experiencing that you can remember that your family shared with you that kind of, as you got older, before you went to this treatment, let you, you know, that you said something just isn't right? What were some of the complications that was going on as you was getting older?
I would have headaches frequently. Focusing in class was really difficult. Being able to pay attention to the teacher at the front of the room while sitting still. They mimic ADHD-like behaviors where you're shifty, you're looking around, you can't focus. And
Right.
so I was oftentimes just like, I would be like scribbling in class because like I needed to do something. And so there was a lot of things that like I just could not focus on what was being laid out in front of me. And that made learning very difficult for me in school. And then when I finally got my first nursing assistant job is when I learned how to learn. I learned I need to actually do an activity in order to learn it. And so like I started learning that way of actually learning how to do something rather than just being told, so that I couldn't be told anything. Like it was when they say someone's hard-headed or something, you can't tell them nothing. Like that applied to me. Like I had to learn it myself.
When you became more of a hands-on individual student, more than trying to process through your brain. But because you was diagnosed with the ADH and all that other kind of stuff, is it because of the several different head traumas, was your brain constantly firing on so many cylinders that you probably just couldn't concentrate on a lot of things?
It was, and I was never diagnosed with ADHD until, I still haven't had a proper diagnosis for it, but it was ADHD-like behaviors. And my parents didn't really pay much attention to them because they just thought that it was like childlike behaviors, like, oh, they're just, she had too much sugar that day, or, she's restless, or she, has too much energy and she needs to go exercise. And so like my parents, they wrote it off for very valid reasons. And they didn't ever try to do any neurological treatment or anything for it. This is probably the one complaint that I had about my parents, is that they allowed me to fail in school. They did not take an active involvement in making sure that my grades were good, or that my homework was done, or that I understood the content. And so
What do you mean, like they didn't take an active role? Like, what would you consider them not taking an active role? Like, were they more involved, self-absorbed into their own stuff? Did they have their own traumas? I mean,
Oh
elaborate a
yeah.
little bit more on that.
They both came from households of different origins. My dad's father was abusive, and there was a lot of abuse in his household. And he had to be the breadwinner. So my father was often at work or at home asleep. And so when I was present in the same household with him, I would be shifts passing in the night before I left for school or after I came home from school. He would getting ready for work. So he was just never home or presently emotionally available for me. And then my mother, they both worked full time. So she was often at work, and then her job was very stressful. She worked at the airport, and she was a ramper. And so she would, be lugging luggage around and doing all kinds of things at the airport, dealing with, crabby people. And so she would come home empty and not being able to like really give back to her kids. So she'd come home, and then she'd have a self-care routine of reading and going for a walk and having solitude that she would need to recharge so that she could go to work again the next day.
Right.
And so I really kind of became that, like, I'm just going to take care of myself, I'll just take care of what I need. And so, that's why I was very free range. I was outside with a lot of my neighborhood friends all the time. We were watching the boys skateboarding in the ditches. We were just wandering around. So I was very like just unsupervised. So it's not that they didn't care. They were so consumed with keeping it together that I was just ignored.
So I take it, as your life began to develop, it became more abandonment issues, more a need for validation too. I would take it.
Yeah.
How did you basically stay out of trouble with with very minimum supervision, as especially being a female?
Well, I didn't. And that's why there's book number 2.
Don't talk about that one yet.
No, I'm just saying there's a story behind it. There's a story. I didn't get caught, is a lot of it, is that like I was out doing things I shouldn't have been doing, but every summer my mom would say, you can't really be left alone over the summer by yourself. And my sister wasn't we're not connected anymore. And so my mom would send me to Chicago to spend time with my grandma, and my granny became like, that beacon of hope for me to, my life doesn't have to be in New Mexico all the time. This is just what it's like right now. This is just my early years. Mm. And so then when I had the opportunity to move to Wisconsin after high school, I took the opportunity to come up and to try a different life and to become a different person and step into other opportunities that existed. So it was that consistency of having that family member that cared, that was always there for me, that always came back, that always, never judged me and never, shamed me over and over for it. She just continued to love me through it. That's what really kind of helped.
What were some of the other things that might have impacted you while going through this situation with your head trauma and trying to develop into a productive woman? What were some of the other things that might have impacted you? Because you said you went from point A to point B. There didn't seem to be too much stabilization. And you would think for a young woman growing up that, I would be worrying about my daughter, being molested or being, sexually assaulted or, just, I'm trying to grasp my head around this.
And you're not wrong, because like all of that did happen to me. And I go into it further in my stories about growing up. Like I was exposed to a sexual education, and that's not to say that like I was overly molested or anything, but like I was given a sexual education about body reproduction and what a period meant and what birth looked like. So I was given an education about things like that. And then when I did have an adverse experience that happened in my family where my sister and dad had an incident that is not my story to share, I then was told all of these things. And I was now suddenly labeled as like a child who had a predator parent. And I had to learn about what all that meant. And it didn't match my reality because people would tell me something, but I'd be like, but my dad's just sitting there. Like, so then I had this identity thrown onto my family that labeled me as a promiscuous teenager, and then I became one, and then that all really messed up with my head too. A lot of abandonment issues, because then my father like withdrew from any interactions with his children after that happened, because he was just like, I'll still provide, but I'll just stay out of the way, like I'll just leave you guys alone. And so like from age 13 to 18, like he was just like, I'll work and sleep and just take care of the bills, and she'll be out of here after high school. And that's what happened. But it set me up for a lot of misconceptions about men and life later in life that I had.
What do you mean, like misconceptions about men and life?
Just like, people being there for me, they'll provide, but like the emotional support. So like, I didn't really get a lot of emotional support from men over my life after that. Like my first husband, I ruined that relationship. And then the second husband was a little emotionally distant. And I was like, well, we're having a kid together, and we have all of this, and it's not so bad. I can manage this. So like I just learned to stuff my emotions down and just deny myself. I denied myself for too many years. Right. And then caregiving, becoming a nurse, you put everything into taking care of other people, and that becomes your identity, and you just adopt into it, and then you almost become complacent that you have to take care of yourself. And you just forget. And so let's go back a minute. I didn't mean to cut you off. Let's go back a minute. Okay.
So you get married. When does the nursing career, because most of your books is, well, I'm not going to tell the end of it, but your path at the end of the day is to change what you saw. When did with all of this chaos and head trauma and stuff going on and trying to, let me call it what it is, trying to find Andrea is going on, how did the nursing field even surface?
I wanted to have a career, and I wanted to go into the military. That didn't work out. So then when I was looking into what else could I do, I committed myself to being a caregiver. My Granny Sally, she always really like saw that in me and kind of harnessed that and was like, well, why don't you try going and being a CNA? I started to do that. And then when I got my first job at a major hospital, I started learning about patients with cystic fibrosis. That was really interesting to me to learn about the body that way, a genetic disorder that people are born with, and how that actually affects somebody's life. And so those people actually like really inspired me to learn more about human anatomy. But because at the time that I got my first job as a nursing assistant, I was also pregnant with my first son. And I was like, what is this genetic component? What is this at risk for? What's the risk of my child having this? And so like that really sparked my interest in nursing. And then for the next, up until about 2017 is when my identity started to really surface as a nurse. I had been a registered nurse at that point for 3 years. I started the nursing journey in 2007. And then I started going to school, getting all my prerequisites ready to go, because I was a horrible high school student, so I had to retake a lot of classes to get into college, into the program. And I graduated when I was 30 years old, and with my associate's degree, and I proudly only have my associate's degree. And I took the same NCLEX exam that somebody with their bachelor's would take. And I am so happy for myself that I did it. But then I'd been an RN for 3 years. I had worked at a county jail, a long-term acute care facility, and then I got back into working in the hospital. And that's when I saw something that I wasn't okay with. I saw something and it was malpractice, and I was told to ignore it, and I couldn't. And that was when I really woke up as somebody that was like, I have a problem with this, and I'm going to say something. And so I started advocating for myself. And for patients a lot stronger back then. And that's where that book starts to come into, where it's like I started seeing things differently, and now I speak up for other people. but now even more so, I'm speaking up for myself too, because, you know, we all deserve an equal and fair chance to have a really great quality of life, and we all should.
Let's go back a minute. I know we keep going back, but your story is truly remarkable. But I remember the whole story. It's almost like Perry Mason. I know the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So let's go back a little bit. We're still on the first book.
Yeah.
You had a treatment within that first book that literally you talk about awakening.
Yep.
Clearly, this is new experimental, but it took you and really opened your third eye, so to speak, to seeing a lot more than just what's going on in the as a nurse, but also what was going on in your house, things that clearly transformed you into a whole new, different Miss Johnston. Tell the viewers about that treatment.
So when I decided to do the ketamine treatment, it had been a really rocky road. I had been in 3 different mental health hospitalizations for anxiety and depression relation things. I had tried a bunch of different medications. I had been doing work with a spiritual healer. I had done life coaching. I have done therapy. So I've done a lot of these things. So this was not I'm going to try this first type of thing. Like, it was really thought out. And
Andrea, were you ever, didn't mean to cut you off again, were you ever suicidal through all this? Because this sounds like a lot of shit.
Yeah, you know? There was one suicide attempt.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just was curious. Go ahead.
Yeah, because the thinking can get you to the point where, you know, you are so inside your own head as to, you know, I can't do this anymore. Life's not worth living. You are all alone. You are the last person here. You are the last person on earth. Like, that's it. Let's go. Come on. Let's get on this light beam and let's leave. So I didn't want to think like that anymore. I didn't want to think about like that I'm so different from everybody else that I don't deserve to be here anymore. And I was like, all right, I have to do something about it. And I spoke with a colleague of mine who had done this, and he's just like, it's the kindest thing that you can do for yourself, because your brain is now wired as such because of all of the traumas and everything. It's like as if you're sitting on a sledding hill and you go down the first time, freshly laid snow, the first time you create an indent in the snow. And then if you go down that same indent 100 times, it's now a rut. And you can't do anything but go to the bottom of that rut, the same time, same speed, everything. It's the same rut. And you're going to repeat it every single time until you are able to get out of the rut. I was not able to get out of the rut because I had physical damage done to my brain that was preventing me to doing that. So what ketamine does is it's like when your mind is on relax, and this infusion lasts from 45 to 50 minutes, and you're so relaxed that it's like a new fresh coat of snow is being laid. And so the next time you have a thought impulse, it can travel wherever it wants to go, and it's not going to go in that rut anymore. And so when I did the treatment, I woke up from it and I was just like, you know what? I do have a lot to say. And 2 hours after the infusion, I had taken all of my insights and drafts and everything that I had done, and I started working on the Struggle to Change Healthcare book, and I wrote it in 4 days.
So basically what you're saying, and congratulations for the success of the 2 books and the treatment plan. So what you're saying is here's a female that had multiple traumas to her head, firing off all kind of signals, information's being unable to process. And when it is processing, it's processing the good, the bad, and the ugly, but with no sense of directions or filtrations. So you go and you get this treatment. Now you're pretty much genetically re-hardwired, so to speak. Correct?
I got reset, and I'm not afraid to say it. You know, it reset.
You know, people will say that's unreal, but you're living testimony that this worked.
I am a success story.
How now we get into part 2 of this book. the beautiful part, because there's always sadness, trying to overcome sadness, and then there's the blossom of the whole entire you. So you get into that. Now, how do we get into part two of the book? Because now clearly all this new fascination, this new information, the almost pain free, but you still see some of the pain. How do you take it now and put it into the second part of your life? Because this is a new life for you.
Yeah, so I finished the first book and I started working with a publisher and got that going. And I said, you know what, there's more to this story. And I don't want to really carry this story with me forever. So I want to write it out one more time, because these stories have been told to me in so many ways for all my life, and those narratives of being the abused X, Y, and Z, the traumatized this, all of these stories, they've carried with me as lessons. And they were not the easy way lessons. And so now it's like, all right, so I started writing out from my point of view what I remembered these experiences to be in my life. What were these transformative experiences that I went through, and how did they impact me? And so then I started just writing. And so then I wrote the second book. I started writing it and I finished it writing out just everything in 12 days. And I just said, this is how I remember it. This is how I remember everything of my life from my point of view. Somebody else can tell me what happened to me, but
Right.
This is what I remember. And so I wrote it out and I said, I'm going to write it out, and I'm going to just write out what I learned from myself experiencing this.
Give me 3 examples of 3 things that somebody or yourself thought this way, the new transformation. This is how reality really is.
So in nursing, for example, we're really not taught about the cost of care. We are taught how to save lives. We are taught how to resuscitate somebody and to keep their airway open and you breathing and your heart beating. And so I can do that for you if you would like. But going into entrepreneurship, you have to brand yourself and you have to do all of these things. And it's not ever taught to a caregiver. It's really not. And so learning a completely different mindset, for one, has been a huge thing for me, just understanding the way that the rest of the world works, because a caregiver's life is not like that. We do things very differently. Also, that caregivers are conditioned to control chaos and to create any kind of control that they can. And so we put ourselves often into very unfortunate situations because we're used to it. It's normal for us. And so it's very damaging for women who are untethered, as I'll call it, like, not married, not with their, a close relationship with a male companion or partner in general. Like, we're very vulnerable to connecting and disconnecting with a lot of things that are very dangerous for us. Mm-hmm. So I learned that coming into some awakening from it, and then just really learning how to trust that people are good and kind and not everybody's trying to harm you anymore. Just kind of learning how to realize that some people really just want to have a 5-minute conversation and never see you again. And some people actually want to get to know you and be a support person for you, because not everybody wants to be a supportive person to you. You can have a conversation with somebody on a dating app and you think, oh, this person cares. And that person's just like, oh, this person just might want to have a drink with me and then I'll never see them again. And so, like, understanding who to ask help from, who to be a support person to, how to be a good friend. That was another huge thing that I learned in all of this.
Coming after being genetically rehardwired or reprogrammed, what is the toughest part about your new reality, outside of the 3 things that you just said? But what are at least 2 things that you go, wow, this was tough, but I see what it really is now?
Part of it is, so I've always been very body aware, but coming back into like a full body experience and being able to push my limits physically again. And you're an athlete, you understand when you're out of the physical fitness realm for a period of time, getting back into it. How do these muscles move? How do we do these things again? How do I get into this position? Am I bending or moving the right way? And so like that is such a metaphor for my whole life right now, is just like, how do I be seen in the flesh again? Because like I feel differently in my body, even though I remember everything that's happened to me, I just feel somewhat different in how I'm moving through life. And so it's just kind of like, I feel like I need reassurance, but I have to know that like I'm getting that from God by being alive and having another breath in me, that I'm reassured I am okay. I am here. This life is for you. It's all right. So that's been one thing. And just kind of like, again, the physical part of it of just like pushing myself. I started getting into running again. And I'm going to get down from that 12-minute mile and get better. But just like, that's been another thing too, is like learning what I like again and being like, oh yeah, you have run a half marathon before, you can do this again. So like, just kind of relearning like what I actually like in life.
What do you wrote 2 great books? Before we wrap up, what should the viewer, the reader, expect to get out of your journey, out of both of those books?
Good question. It's a different perspective. It is a perspective from somebody who is looking at reality very objectively. Because subjective reality is very different than objective reality, and sometimes it is what it is. But this was a perspective of like, this is what was in the room. There was no overlay for an underlay. This is exactly what is going on in this moment in time when I remember it. And then here now today as a 40-year-old woman, this is the impact that it had on me, my relationships and all of that. So just, I would like for people to understand empathy a little bit better as a collective, because if we all just understand how to actually utilize empathy more, we can all start being kinder to ourselves. And then as a result, we're going to be kinder to other people, and that can have a ripple change effect.
What part of that ripple effect you mentioned empathy before we wrap up? What part of your life, your journey, do you wish you can throw that rock in and change the ripple effect of your life?
I know you're looking for a shorter answer, but I wish in 2020, I wish that I would have been able to step away at a time and go and trust my gut a little bit stronger and just do what I wanted to have done and not have listened to what other people were telling me that I should do. Because when I deviated from what I felt was right in my heart was when the worst things possible came to life.
Wow. How can the viewers get the book? How can they reach out to you?
DreaVanessa.com is my author website. Contact page is on there for that. I am putting together my consultancy business, which is On Purpose Dream Consulting. You can find us on Facebook. And that's going to be having some really interesting webinars and different information that I'm going to be posting through that consultancy site, and just providing more information on really how to be the best support person to somebody who is experiencing a trauma, and how to take care of yourself and how to take care of other people without overstepping or having false hope or expectations.
Andrea, what's your end game here? A beautiful book. Beautiful story. Once again, thanks for sharing that and bringing it to my attention and to the viewers. What's the end game for you? What's the big picture for you in the world that you live in?
Big picture is that I can help people just to see that, like, if we start shifting positively towards solutions, we can all start finding solutions in the world, and we can actually make a really large positive shift into fixing things. In the Struggle to Change Healthcare, I describe a hospital experience of the future, and it's a beautiful vision and dream that I have for what the hospital experience could be. And so that's one thing that I really want to aim towards, is to really, bringing nurses back into, bringing people back into wanting to be nurses for one, and then bringing nurses back into the hospital and it being a non-traumatic experience to be a healthcare provider and deliver medical attention. So me continuing on that journey, really trying to help bring hope back to healthcare. I like to use medical attention as more as my word, hope back to medical attention. But like helping out and just bringing forward the healthcare revolution. And there's so many things that I want to do. At the end of the day, all I truly want to do is live on a farm with some chickens and some goats and have a bunch of little kids running around me. But first things first, God assigned me a mission and I'm decided to stop fighting it. And that's why I decided to share my story and to come out and to be here today.
Andrea, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you support, follow, get the book, read it. It's a beautiful story about her life, about the transformation, and about understanding the importance of the healthcare industry. And my shouts out to all the healthcare professionals out there and the nurses. And thanks for taking a stand and bringing awareness to us. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show.